All right, I want to stop you here for just a moment. This is News Center, news as it breaks. So we just want to take a bit of a detour from this, what's trending with Zinzi Kibiku, but we want to take you live to Mombasa now. The government spokesman, Kiraithe, is making a speech from Mombasa. Remember, the cabinet secretary is there. President has been there for the last couple of days. Eric Kiraithe, government spokesman, making a speech now from Mombasa County. Let's take you there live now.
That was developed in a very cordial environment in the years leading to 2008. All areas of the country were consulted, and the government had the input of several development experts from similar countries all over the world. And when we look at the year 2016, Kenya has achieved key milestones in terms of infrastructural development. Let me mention the standard gauge railway. It is a national ambition dating back to the 1960s, when the world shifted from the type of railway we still have in this country, which was put here by the Britons over a century ago. And therefore, the fact that this is no longer a dream, it is now a project which we are talking about being operationalized by March of next year, in about 3 months. And at least it is town-bound. It shows that we have taken a major step forward. As a country also, we can mention the implementation of the National Digital Literacy Program, which has started in earnest, and at least in every county there is a school where standard 1 students are now having tablets. The National Water Management Master Plan, drawn in the 70s and 80s, is also well in progress. Basically, with these infrastructural foundational issues well in progress, the meaning is that Kenyans can reasonably now sit back and confidently watch the country move to the newly industrializing status by the year 2030. And this is something we are expecting in this lifetime. It's no longer a dream. What looked like a dream, through a concerted effort and a very determined leadership in this administration, we are able to convert it into a project which is both specific, achievable, and each component has a timeline within which it can be achieved. Yeah, that is the good news of the year 2016. We have also had some bad news, like the doctor strike, which is still ongoing, and which is a very, very unfortunate occurrence in this country. Doctors strike, and doctors, like policemen, are not required when we are celebrating and enjoying Christmas. It's about diseases, it's about injuries, and it is about pain, suffering, and death. That is what ill health is all about. And this one has been a most unfortunate challenge for the government this year. It is even more unfortunate because, going by the nature of the strike, it is actually affecting the ordinary Kenyans. And we are not hesitating to point a finger at the Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union. People who hold the qualification they hold, largely because the Kenyan taxpayer has paid for their education and training. Doctors in this country have been trained largely in our universities, and the Kenyan taxpayer has invested in them, first and foremost. You all recall that on 5th December, they commenced their strike. And going by the ruling of October 5 in our courts, this strike is actually illegal. It has been declared so. And even the leaders of this union have been informed by the courts that they are in contempt of the courts. The strike, as you know, has been declared illegal, and the doctors have not even contradicted this fact. They have never argued that their strike is legal. It is also important to note that the CBA they have cited as the basis of their strike was signed on specific conditional procedures, which were yet to be completed when they called the strike. As a show of goodwill and in recognition of the common denominator, the government of Kenya, through exams, not only negotiated over and above the fact that the strike is illegal, not only negotiated with the doctors continuously. As I am talking to you now, the cabinet secretary in charge of World, Dr. Kiraithe Mailo, is one of the few Kenyans who has sat in the office throughout this morning trying to see how he can negotiate the country out of this situation. The government offered a very good package. The government has actually offered two packages, the first one and the second one, against which the union has not bothered even to respond, to accept or to reject. And basically where we are with the government today is that the gross pay for a fresh graduate is about 180,000 shillings. I think the ministry, I believe the Ministry of Health published what they have offered. And I can tell you, even within the region and within Africa and several other countries, this is a very, very good pay for somebody who has just left university. I can tell you that any one of us, including you who is seated there, wouldn't mind a 300% salary increment, but this one does not actually occur. However, as I have stated, the government is conscious and still very clear that the common denominator on all this is the suffering of Kenyans who either disease, injury, or any other situation of nature, even hereditary, and who are not able to pay, cannot still access medical services. And in recognition of this, the government is prepared to set everything else aside and sit with the doctors to ensure that this matter ends before we cross over to the new year. Of course, the Cabinet Secretary for Health is making every possible effort, and the government is prepared to dialogue. But as we are dialoguing, the government would want to remind KMPDU that the collective bargaining agreement signed on 27 was contingent and subject to advice from the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, who have already offered their advice, and the Treasury has already provided what it believes the Kenyan taxpayer can pay and sustain. And that is why the government has been able to offer the salary increments they did. And as we also go on this, we also want the KPDU to realize that health is a devolved function, and we cannot wish away the Constitution of Kenya 2010, and therefore any agreement reached must be agreed upon by the county governments. Another thing we have noted and would want to appreciate very highly as a government is that a lot of doctors in this country have continued to offer services to Kenyans, a lot of them gratis, just because they feel that their professional calling is more binding than monetary or political grand standing. And would want to encourage these doctors as professionals, some in counties like Nakuru, counties like Bomet, we recognize that they have collectively, even in several other hospitals. One of my staff today visited Kisumu, New Nyanza, and he found a lot of doctors quietly offering services. The government is stating that we are not, whereas we are committed to the union, which is still the legitimate body to negotiate for doctors, we are appealing to the professionals who would want to liberate themselves from Ali Siltrant team of people who are not prepared to obey any law, who are not prepared to observe the provisions of the Constitution, who will not obey court orders. We are prepared to extend a leeway so that these professionals who want to continue serving Kenyans can do so with freedom, security, and they can do it even in a structured way. And having said that, we again reiterate like any other professionals of essential services, doctors have one contract with the government, which is about money, pay, and terms and condition of service. Medical doctors also have another contract, and would want to appreciate the nurses who obeyed this calling. Even as the process continued, they resumed the duty. And the contract is with the suffering humanity, who we find in hospitals, who might find themselves caught up in road accidents and so on and so forth. And we want to believe that for the sake of humanity, this contract supersedes that contract whose aim are issues like 300% salary increment. Finally, we would want to address ourselves generally to citizen security. And on this particular matter, we will focus on the ongoing debate on the Election Laws Amendment Act, which were passed by Parliament in August. The government wishes to appreciate the strategy taken by the Senate in that they are sought to give Kenyans a sober, rational opportunity to discuss this matter of critical national interest. Let me reiterate that national interest is not about the government of the day. It's not about the government, the people you see in big offices. National interest is about the Kenyan going to the marketplace. It's about the Kenyan going to the construction site. It's about the fisherman. It's about the Kenyan driving his matatu. It's about the tout. And it's about all of us being able to do what we need to do to survive individually and collectively without any unnecessary hindrance and free of fear or intimidation. Without prejudice to any ongoing efforts to reach a workable solution in a nationally cordial process and in the interest of the ordinary citizen who might not understand what the dialogue is all about, we wish to draw the attention of the public to a few realities in respect of the information and technology, information communication technology, ICT, which is at the bottom of the current dialogue. The reality of this technology is actually in relation to the transmission of massive data within a defined time limit, which managing the Kenyan general election is. We don't want to labor about the excitement and tension an election in Kenya elicits at the best of time. And we don't want to go into the minor details of the fact that our election is now by law a 6-in-1. We have MCA, we have MP, we have women rep, we have governor, we have senator, and president. But in all this and the massive data to be transmitted within a very short time, there are few realities about ICT which really would be common knowledge if we did not have so much excitement about. The first reality is that a country like Kenya cannot claim to be in full control of the process. We don't own so many things. We have to rely on service providers and all that. And if, for example, an hitch occurred in a polling station, the presiding officer seated there would not be in a position to explain to the electorate why they are standing on the queue. Those who have the experience of queuing for voting in this country know what would be occurring. On that particular day, we shall be transmitting from what is known now that 1,000 polling stations going by the last election, and from every part of Kenya. And we really would want to assure Kenyans and to do everything that can be done by all those who are responsible to ensure that that anxiety is managed. The second one is hacking. In the current debate, most commentators on hacking have actually viewed the other parts of the political divide as the major culprit. If I was talking to some friends from Jubilee last night, and they seemed convinced actually that the ODM wants that system so that they can hack. When later this breakfast I sat with one of my friends who has been on ODM all his life, he is saying, you see, the hackers will come from Jubilee. I think that is a very mistaken view to look at it. Hacking, as the banks, media houses, and other institutions of interest can tell you, has a lot of perpetrators. Some of it can be driven by the competitors of the suppliers of the systems. Some of it is pure mischief. Somebody wants just to prove that he can do it. And of course, in a country like Kenya, we have known and sworn enemies. It can be terrorism. I believe at least Al-Shabaab has clearly stated that they wouldn't mind destabilizing this country, and they have tried it several times. And therefore, hacking is a reality we cannot escape from. The other one is, of course, the introduction of viruses, which is very closely related to this. And in the short history of ICT, the effects and range of viruses on all kinds of systems has been proven beyond any doubt. And the last one is normal breakdown. There are several times many of us want to send money from several parts of this country, going by the coverage. I am not an expert in ICT, but I've gone to very many places in this country where you just lose the network. And these causes must be taken care of. A critical process like an election should not lend itself to the exposure of some of these things. What the ordinary Kenyan wants is a system that the managers can give us an assurance to the farthest extent possible that predictably within this period we shall have completed voting and we shall have submitted the results. Another thing I would want to mention here very clearly is that hackers, those who manufacture viruses, and even other terrorists would actually not be motivated.
All right, that is the government spokesman, Eric Kiraithe, speaking in Mombasa, addressing the press. He's talked quite a bit about the key milestones in the country in 2016, singling out the investments that have been made in infrastructure this year, particularly the SGR. He's also addressed two of the biggest issues in the country right now. That's the doctor's strike, and one is on the amendments to the election law with respect to the ICT aspect of the election. This is what he had to say on the doctor's strike. He says that he calls it, and I quote, a most unfortunate challenge for the government this year. He points a finger at the KMPDU officials, that's the doctors' union. He says these are people who hold their qualifications because taxpayers invested in their education. He says 2 offers have been placed on the table. This is because the CBA signed, according to the government spokesman, were contingent on advice from the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. He says they continue to be in violation of a court order barring them from going on strike and ordering them to return to work. Interestingly, he also said they are willing to offer security to doctors who are willing to be free from what he calls the recalcitrant officials of the union who do not want to obey court orders. Says one of his staff members went to a hospital in Kisumu or in Nyanza area, and there are some doctors there who are quietly offering services. However, he still reiterated that the government is willing to resolve this issue before the year's end. We hope that'll happen. They have just 2 days to do that, going by his statement. Also on matters regarding amendments to the election law that we've seen in the National Assembly and now in the Senate, he lauds the sober debate that's being done by the Senate, talked about the transmission of massive data within a defined time limit, as is the case in an election. He says this is the bone of contention on the table. He says they're not in full control of the ICT process, still relying on service providers. Some of the threats to the electronic transmission of results and electronic identification of voters on polling day. He says some of the 3 biggest threats are hacking. He says Al-Shabaab have made their intentions clear on destabilizing the nation. He's also talked about the threat of viruses as well as system breakdowns. That is what is being said by the government spokesman Eric Kiraithe. We've had a portion of that aired live here on News Center. But